Hello, and welcome to another exciting edition of the Web of Conspiracy. I am your host, Adam Webb. It is great to be back with you again this week. Once again, no live show. This is a podcast version if you're listening. So um, hopefully I can get back to doing some live broadcasts starting next week, but we'll see. Nevertheless, I have a really interesting show, and this one that I've done a version of this show probably about 6 to 8 months ago. I did it on the old program, and I've had a couple requests from other people who were looking for the show before, and I thought, well, why don't I just go ahead and just do the show again, do it here on Spreaker, and kind of add a little bit more to it than what I did last time, and kind of maybe tweak a little bit since that last show. So today. Um, the black eyed kids, it's a fascinating phenomenon, and it's one that has seemed to have grown in popularity over the recent years. It is certainly a more recent addition to the paranormal world, so to speak, in terms of the accepted terminology and what constitutes uh, an encounter with one of these black eyed kids. So I'll be getting that here shortly. Just a few announcements here about the show and some of the things going forward. Um, those of you who haven't already heard, if you haven't listened or if you haven't caught on, the show is now on Stitcher, um, and it's an awesome app available on Android, iPhone, tablet devices. It's awesome. You can listen. They have over 20,000 shows. Of course, you can listen to my show on there, get it on demand almost as soon as I publish the show. So that is cool. Very little turnaround time there. And you can go back and listen to old shows as well. So that's just another great way to be able to listen. Um, and then, also write me some reviews there. Let me know how I'm doing. Give me some feedback. And the same goes for those of you who listen to the show on iTunes. If you download it through iTunes, give me some feedback there. I love to get as much feedback as possible. So let me know. As well as if there's any kind of particular topic that you want to talk about. I've got a number of things lined up. I usually try to plan a few shows in advance in terms of what I'm going to talk about, with a little bit of flexibility. So I've got an idea of where I'm going, but I love to be able to get some feedback from the listeners as well. So um, building onto that, if you haven't had a chance to check out the website, Web of Conspiracy, all one word, .wix.com /web hyphen of hyphen conspiracy. I know it's long, it's convoluted, and when I can, I'm certainly going to buy my own. But for the time being, I'm working on a budget that's pretty low. So free is always the best choice here for me. So check out the website. I've got a ton of different stuff I'm putting up on there. I'm usually trying to add and tweak to it as I go, and I think I found a format that I like. I got going on right now. You can also listen to old shows there as well as listen to the show live. And as soon as they're available on the podcasted version, I update that usually at least once a week, sometimes more. Um, so by all means, let me know what you think of the website, as well as anything that you'd like me to see to add. I am going to be planning a live chat again starting in February. I did one a few weeks back, and it went fairly well. Um, so I'd like to kind of build on that a little bit more and kind of go from there. Once I have an exact date and time, I will go ahead and announce it in forthcoming podcast. But I am planning on one in the month of February. Um, so that being said, check out the show's Facebook page, Twitter, Google Plus. Now I haven't done much on there at all this week, so um, kind of been a busy week doing the other day-to-day routines. So I look to be able to add to that as I go, and hopefully have a little bit more time to be able to do some more stuff there as well. Um, so that being said, um, the topic for today is one that when I first heard about the black-eyed children, the black-eyed kids, BEKs or BECs, depending on how you hear it talked about, the phenomenon immediately it was one of those things where I immediately was drawn to it. I found it fascinating and disturbing all at once, as I think many people do when they hear about these strange encounters with these really odd kids. Um, it is a topic that has blossomed since about the 1990s. Um, it is of the internet age in many respects. Now, that being said, I don't believe that this is something that's exclusive to only, although the only reason this came about was because it was an internet story and it kind of blew from there. I don't necessarily think that's the case at all. As a matter of fact, there would seem to be some evidence to the contrary. But nevertheless, with the advent of the internet and the ability to reach and communicate to unknown numbers of masses, it has given formats for individuals to be able to express, talk about, to discuss things that they're seeking out answers for. And because of the internet, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. That's why lots of people can do lots of different things. That's why we have blogs. That's why we have Twitter. That's why we have Facebook. All these wonderful things. And the Black Eyed Kids is very much part of the internet phenomenon. And as I said, I don't believe that that's necessarily a situation where the internet created it as much as the internet gave an outlet for it. So these reports started creeping up in the 90s. Now, as I said, there are also accounts if you surf through and you can find and look at some of these, as well as the well, at this point, the best work that I've found on the Black Eyed Children phenomenon is called The Black Eyed Children by David Weatherly. If you haven't read that book, I would strongly recommend it. It's not an overwhelming read. It's not anything that's going to be too difficult to read or use language. It's not. It's easily read, easily understood. Great book, very informative, and it is, in my opinion, the opus in terms of the Black Eyed Children phenomenon. So a lot of the material and the content that I'm talking about has been from stuff I've read there, as well as seeking out other sources. So, by all means, if you're interested after hearing about this, I urge you to check it all out. Um, it's there's some crazy stuff and some crazy stories, and I'll touch on a little bit of it. So, the Black Eyed Kids. Now, for those of you who are completely unfamiliar with what they're described as, they're often depicted as being these preteen to early teenage kids that appear to have look kind of in I guess a bit of a disheveled dress, so to speak. They 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 don't necessarily stand out in terms of the way that they look. They look like a typical preteen, except some of the reports talk about the clothing being appearing maybe handmade or little dull colors, maybe not properly fitting clothing, um, wearing lots of hoodies, darker colors. Um, they are often depicted as having pale skin, and the thing that it strikes some people by a little bit surprised is that they're very formal and polite in their language, which is not something that you come across with a lot of teenagers these days, unfortunately. However, there are exceptions to every rule, but nevertheless, the language and the manner of speaking comes off a little different, and it's almost as if though they're reading from a script. It's a very robotic type of delivery, um, very memorized kind of delivery. Now, the kicker in all this is that of course, they have black eyes. And when I say black eyes, I mean completely black eyes, not just the pupils and the corneas, but as well as the white part of the eye, the sclera. Now, the encounters with these black-eyed kids, as I said, becoming increasingly popular. More and more reports of them are popping up. More and more people are talking about having experiences. So it's very difficult to tell exactly when this phenomenon has taken off or it's become a more recent phenomenon. Nevertheless, there are stories and there are reports that people seeing black-eyed children uh, 40, 50 years ago. And in some cases, not only is this phenomenon now, we're not talking about just black-eyed kids anymore. There's also reports about black-eyed adults, black-eyed, older, grandparent types. The range is starting to grow. But nevertheless, the focus still seems to be heavily upon the black-eyed children. And as I said, while the reports have centered mostly in a more modern period, there are indications that this has gone on for a much longer period of time and just has not gone unreported up until the modern age. So, What is a typical black-eyed kid encounter? Well, it starts with a knock on the door, an unexpected knock on the door, later in the evenings, usually getting towards dusk. Uh, this individual will go to their door. They will see, looking through a peephole or looking through a window, they'll see a couple kids standing there at the door. Um, the interesting thing in this is that most of the people, upon just glimpsing, without even noticing the eyes, without noticing anything different, they immediately get this feeling of dread. Like there's just something off. And when these kids and when the individuals, respond to the door knock, either talk to them or even open the door a bit and talk to them, these kids will ask rather unusual questions. In the respect that they'll ask if they can come in and use their bathroom, or if they could come in and use their phone if they need to call their parents for a ride, or in some cases, either some other strange ones such as watching TV, or asking for them to give them a ride to their home. It's at this point that people they begin to have this sense of dread, as if though there's something wrong here, but they also have this overwhelming compulsion to let these kids in. There's many tales of them having to really, these individuals that are targeted having to really force themselves to not allow the kids into the home. So you have these very unusual requests. Not only that, but then in some of these requests, there'll be some things that'll be a little odd and a little confusing, a little off. For instance, in the case of these kids coming to the door, and they'll ask to use the phone, and then they'll say um, something to the effect of like, "We need to call our mother. If we don't, he'll be mad at us." Now, there's an obvious confusion of gender in this sentence, where referring to mother as he, as if though they're trying to present something that would compel you to allow them in to use your phone, yet they don't know that they're confusing a gender with the mother with the he, and there's a lot of things along the nature where they're confusing pronouns, and it's like they don't have a complete mastery of the language. Now, that wouldn't necessarily be unusual for someone who maybe was not native English speaker, but none of these reports talk about necessarily these kids having an accent or being from someplace other than sounding as if though they're from the United States, and having lived in the United States, at least having a some sort of mastery of the English language. That it would seem odd that they would have such an issue with confusion of pronouns, particularly in gender, as if though it's an unknown thing to them. They don't seem to have a good grasp of it. So you get these really kind of bizarre interactions. You have another interesting phenomenon associated, and that is in some of the cases where people who have reported having these experiences, where they've had a knock on the door, and say perhaps they have dogs, and most of us who've owned dogs know that dogs will usually respond by barking at the door, or it kind of works them up a little bit. And this one gentleman who was described himself as, he was a martial arts expert, big guy, not one to be scared of anybody, and he owned a Rottweiler. And he got a knock on the door. His Rottweiler did the usual barking and running towards the door, like he always does when he hears a knock. But yet at this point, as the dog is approaching the door, it all of a sudden stops, almost slipping and sliding over itself, and then like backs away, cowering, whimpering away from the door, without having seen what's beyond it. It would appear as if though this dog recognized that whatever was on the other side of this door, it wasn't the typical visitor that it would encounter. It wasn't the typical force or whatever it sensed. Of course, dogs have a keener sense of smell and keener sense of hearing than humans. At least can hear and smell things that we can't. So whatever this was, this dog recognized immediately without even seeing that it should be concerned, that it should be scared. and immediately went into a submissive mode and trying to get away from the situation. That was the first red flag for this gentleman, who had the compulsion to do it, had this compulsion to open the door, but had to resist and admitted that he felt completely terrified with what he saw. And the thing is in all these cases, people don't recognize and they don't see the black eyes right away. They kind of look down a little bit, and of course, if they're wearing hoodies, it makes it even harder to see. So it's not until the very end that they happen to notice these black eyes. These kids will then look up as if they're trying to force you, get inside your head, um, to let them in. So they see these eyes, and the fear just sets in with most people who encounter this, and some still feel compelled. And it's not until they finally can overcome this compulsion, the fear is so great that they shut the door. And many cases, the knocks are still occurring. They still plead to be let in. Eventually they stop, but they don't go away easy. And they don't give up on whatever their goal is inside that house. They want in. There's another story of a woman who she was up in her bedroom reading one evening, preparing for bed, and she received a knock on the door. Very similar situation in terms that she got this funny feeling. They had asked to be able to come in to use her restroom. She declined, and at that point, she felt the compulsion, but was so terrified upon seeing those black eyes, she shut the door, locked it, went up to her room, and while she was up in her room, she turned the light off because she was scared, and she happened to look out the window, and those kids were standing outside along the side of the street on the sidewalk, looking up at her bedroom window. They were just staring up at her. Really creepy stuff. Now, what we have been able to determine is that it seems in every case these beings want to be let in, whether it's knocking on someone's car window, pleading for them to let them a ride. They want to be let into your space. Seems to be the overwhelming trend with the black-eyed kid phenomenon. They want to be permitted to be in the same space as you, as if though they have to be permitted to be in the same space as you. Now, there's been a couple of stories of people who have, in fact, let black-eyed kids into their homes or into their vehicles. One particular story was a young woman who had left her about 5, 6 year old son out in the car while she ran in real quick to the grocery store to get something. She comes back out. She opens the door, sits down, and then there's this kid sitting in the back seat with her kid. Her child had allowed this black-eyed kid in. At that point, she saw the eyes, freaked out, grabbed her kid, ran off, called the police. By the time the police got there, the black-eyed child had left the car. Now, the husband had driven over to the grocery store upon her making the phone call, and she was so terrified she wouldn't get back in the car. So the husband agreed to take the car with with their son, and he got in and she took his vehicle. Upon pulling out of the parking lot of the grocery store, um, he was hit in a side collision, and him and the child were both severely injured. Fortunately, they survived. However, they did sustain some pretty severe injuries. So that has led some to believe that these black-eyed children have some sort of evil presence, that once you allow them into your space, that you're being marked for something, or you're going to have some sort of unfortunate incident occur. Now, another story tells of a gentleman who had let a black-eyed kid into his home to use the phone without really realizing that there was black eyes until it already let them in. Upon realizing this, getting this sudden sinking feeling, wound up deciding that, you know what, the heck with it, take whatever you want. He ran out the back door. Ran to a neighbor's house, and by the time he went to the neighbors and had come back with his neighbor, the kids had gone and they had not taken anything. But what was so creepy was that they continued to ask him while they were in there. The thing that made him strange, what seemed strange, is that they asked him if everything was okay, and and had seemed as if though the impression what he said he got very dizzy, kind of very lightheaded, and then was told before he ran out that they were there to collect him. Now that's kind of a strange thing right there. They were there to collect him. Collect him for what? He doesn't know, because he ran out of there as quick as he could. Smart move. The smart move would have been not let him in, period, apparently, right? Nevertheless, they told him that they were there to collect him. Very creepy, very strange, very bizarre. Now, as of the time that this story has been published, I don't know if anything has happened to this gentleman or not. What I do know is that he lives in fear, has nightmares, that he wakes up believing that they're in his house still, that they're there, that they're in his home, and that they're trying to collect him yet again. So there's this compulsion that you know they want in, they want in, they want in, and in this case, this gentleman didn't really recognize the black eyes. Either was just unobservant, didn't pay attention, let them in, and as they were pretending to make a phone call and he noticed that it seemed odd, things began to freak him out a little bit. Things began to change in the way that things felt. At that point, he recognized something was off, and then that's when they told him that they were there to collect him. Absolutely creepy stuff. Now, for me, of all the phenomenon that I have come across, this stuff really does sort of, I guess I would say, it gets me a little bit. It's very bizarre, very peculiar, and it's really hard to determine what these things are. There's a number of theories that float out there. One common one is that perhaps they're vampires, as the legend goes with vampires, right? You have to let them in. You have to let them into your home. That they can't have any power over you until you let them in. So that is one that really does sort of hold for a lot of people. Um, there are others that look at this as a possible ghost or demonic entity that they're there to collect, maybe even perhaps a bit of a grim reaper sort of situation in respect to the collection aspect, right? That they were there to collect. Perhaps this is some sort of encounter with a type of entity that was there to collect them. So maybe, just maybe, there is some sort of sense that this was death, that this was death embodied. So for some people, they see that as a viable option. One of the most common is the alien hybrid theory. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the concept of alien abduction, there are many who report that they've been taken by gray aliens and they have experiments done on them. In some cases, they have sexual experiments done where the removal of semen occurs, or the removal of, for women, sometimes it's removal of fetuses, removal of eggs, things of that nature that occur. And that it's believed that these alien abduction scenarios, that these are aliens performing some sort of hybridization project, and that perhaps these black-eyed kids are the product of that they are truly alien hybrids, that they look like humans, but yet there's some, but yet not entirely. Some people associate that they have this foul odor with them, that they smell really strong, and that they seem to move a little quicker. And of course, they're really pale, and obviously the black eyes, appearing very similar to the way that the almond-shaped black eyes are depicted with the gray aliens. That these black eyes, although they're not almond-shaped necessarily, nevertheless they bear the same color. They don't have anything. They don't have a sclera. They're completely black. So it is believed by many that these are hybrids that are taking people, and that they're taking them where we don't know, perhaps to whatever ship they're from, perhaps to some other, who knows what. Maybe they're going to conduct more experiments. Maybe they're planning another type of breeding scenario. Maybe they're putting these hybrids out to see how they will function and live amongst humans. It's an interesting theory. And if there is any truth to it, to me, that would seem to be a strong possibility for an explanation in the way that they're described, and certainly in the collection aspect. Of course, there are others who argue this is just an urban legend, that it's just an urban legend created from the stories of the early days of the internet that has caught fire. Now, I think that there's certainly maybe some cases that are complete fiction, that there are completely made up and just entertainment value. However, I don't believe that's the case in all scenarios. As I've said before, with a number of the topics that I discussed, I believe there's truth in all of it to a certain degree. Do I think you can believe every story you hear? No. But I do believe that there is something here. Where there is smoke, there is fire. Something is happening on some level. This is not just in somebody's head. This is an experience that is occurring, and it's occurring in different places from people of all walks of life. Now, one explanation that I found on the internet was that perhaps that these kids are just regular kids that are just messed up on drugs. That using the drug Lomotil, which has atropine in it, can cause the eye to dilate immensely, make it incredibly big and appear black, and that was given as a possible theory. Now, after I've consulted with a medical professional to determine if this was even a possibility, and while it's possible that Lomotil may explain some of the behaviors, it would not explain all, and nor would it alter the sclera of the eye, the white of the eye. Lomotil would only affect the pupil, so it would not make the entire eye black. There would still be white around a very dark pupil. So that would not necessarily qualify as a black-eyed kid. So maybe it's possible that someone in panic misidentified and couldn't see well in the light and just didn't see any of the white and it appeared to be all black. That's certainly the case. And I would argue that's probably the case in some scenarios. Nevertheless, as I said, where there is smoke, there's fire. I don't believe that every single one of these cases is true, but I also do not believe that every one of these single cases can be easily explained or categorized as a drug abusing couple of teens. There is something to this. There is the compulsion that everybody feels. There's this unknown force, and that's what cannot be explained. I've been around enough teenagers to know that if you're around a few obnoxious ones, it doesn't take much to be able to resist anything that they ask of you. I have no problem telling a teenage kid no. But these cases, these scenarios, these encounters with these black-eyed kids are different. They transcend normal interactions. And everybody, no matter their background, no matter how big they are, tough they are, whatever the case may be, confident in who they are and in their ability to protect themselves, feel this sense of overwhelming fear coupled with this compulsion, despite that fear, to let them in. That is a scary thought. It's scary to think that we could, in fact, have perhaps our minds tinkered with, which leads more to the possibility that perhaps we're dealing with either some sort of maybe demonic entity along that lines that many people argue this is, or perhaps that this is some sort of alien hybrid that has the ability to communicate telepathically, that they're able to get inside our heads and try to compel us to do things that we would not normally, under any other circumstance, ever consider. It's a fascinating phenomenon. And this is a show that I could probably go on and on and on and tell you dozens more stories, stories all over the place on the internet. Now, as I said, are all of them true? Probably not. But nevertheless, it's interesting to get out there and kind of read and browse. And as I had said before, I strongly recommend if you're interested in the black-eyed children phenomenon, if you want to know more about it, the best source that I have found has been The Black-Eyed Children by David Weatherly. It is the opus in the field. It's really the best and I think there may be some others, but it's certainly the one that I'm the most familiar with and one that I've read, and it is well worth reading if this is a phenomenon that really has grasped your interest. So, all right, that's what I've got for you today. Next week, I'm excited. I'm going to talk about something that's become rather popular lately, including a subject of a docuseries in History Channel, the Oak Island Mysteries. So be sure to check that out, and I'll be back with you next Friday. Until then, have a great week.